Yes, you're quite right that most of the investment from American companies has been in the hydrocarbon sector. That's historically been the case when Kazakhstan made its decision to welcome these investors and the main energy companies to invest and develop the energy resources of Kazakhstan. But since then, over these 25 years, although the United States, as you said, is one of the major investors in Kazakhstan, the American investors and companies look at Kazakhstan as a very interesting place to increase investment in other areas of the economy, particularly in logistics, in technology, and I would say also in agriculture. Kazakhstan historically has been a major exporter of wheat. I think that there are American companies and individuals who have already invested in areas like the production of beef and cattle and in food processing, and I can see this continuing, particularly as the government of Kazakhstan is taking major steps to make their trade policies and their investment policies very friendly to foreign investors. And I think that we will see over the next 25 years a influx of American investment not only in the hydrocarbon sector, but also in these developing sectors of Kazakhstan's economy, such as in high technology, as in services, and in the agricultural sector. Well, like I said, in agriculture, there are American companies from, for instance, like a state like North Dakota that is has a very prosperous business in raising cattle in cold climates for beef production. And so they have invested in Kazakhstan and under the rubric of Kaz beef, and they are now producing very high quality beef products for the market in Kazakhstan and I think for export markets. So there are also General Electric, a major American company, although it has been providing goods and services in the energy sector. There is also the locomotive plant that is a joint venture in Astana, and I think General Electric is looking at future investments in Kazakhstan. Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, Prime Minister Sagintayev, visited the United States earlier this year, and he met with many business investors in New York and in California. And I think that the expectation is from those meetings that there will be also American investors coming here to look at the possibilities. So it's still these early days of investors coming here. But as I said, already there have been American companies like Procter & Gamble. You look at the American Chamber of Commerce here in Almaty, many of their membership are in areas outside of the energy sector that are involved in consumer products and in technology products, services, and things of that nature. So I can see that increasing. There was a delegation that President Trump sent to the expo in Astana that included the president of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, Mr. Washburn, and he sent a delegation here to Kazakhstan to look at the prospects for investing by his corporation in small and medium businesses in Kazakhstan. So we're seeing movement, and I think that I hope that it will be successful for both Kazakhstan and the United States. Well, in these last 25 years, I have witnessed the development of many of the countries that have emerged from the Soviet Union in various different ways. They're all developing differently, according to the fact that they have different traditions in many respects, different social structures, and their political cultures are different. But as you mentioned, there is a very heavy overlay of the institutions and the way of governing from the Soviet period. And that's quite understandable. It's a very heavy imprint. And you know, there are many aspects of the institutions of the Soviet period that have been elements of stability in these countries. You know, the education systems, the medical systems, and things like that. And you know, these things need, as far as changing them and reforming them, and the way the political systems operate in these societies, really have to develop within the societies themselves as they evolve, and the populations and the generations are changing. You know, and 25 years is a very short period of time in the history of any country or any society. And these are very, you know, long gestation periods, and no one quite knows, you know, at the end of the day, how a country will develop its political system or its social system. It's dependent on many factors, the personalities of leaderships, and also on the desires of populations of, you know, between wanting stable, certain ways of doing things. And it's always a risk when you're doing something differently, that there could be dislocations. I mean, the whole, you know, I lived through what was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And of course, it was very traumatic for many of the populations and countries that emerged. The economic declines, rapid declines, that immediately followed that. I don't think any of the peoples or the governments want to repeat the kind of the uncertainty of that period. And so I think as they build confidence in themselves and the populations, develop their own desires and ways, so that their political, economic, and social systems will develop. So it's just part of any development, including, I mean, the United States. We're 239 years as an independent country, and we're still developing. We still have questions about our form of government and the like, and it's natural because it reflects the challenges of a population. Well, I feel my job, if you will, my zadacha as an ambassador, is first to explain my own country to the people as well as the government of the country in which I'm serving, but also to understand and listen to the people of the country in which I'm serving. So I get a great deal of personal pleasure. I learn so much by being able to meet with people from all parts of walks of life in places like Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or Belarus, and travel and try to understand their language, their customs, and listen to their the way they look at the world, which is oftentimes different from the way Americans do. And then I try to explain how Americans look at the world and view it. And the main thing is I respect the views of people, and as diverse as they are, and the like. So for me, it's just my personality is I'm interested in people. I find great pleasure in just being able to listen and talk to them, and not just sit at meetings and discuss high politics. I'm sort of interested in how people live, and I enjoy taking like public transportation and where people may not, you know, and just seeing what their lives are like. It enriches my life, and it enriches particularly my understanding of a country if I can understand its people better. So if that can lead to the respect that I try to show for the country and the people that are in it, can lead, I think, to the mutual understanding of the United States and our United States understanding of a country, and that leads to I think a stronger relationship. So I firmly believe an open relationship, which is why I think it's very important to have exchanges of students and people to travel between the United States and a foreign country like Kazakhstan. I mean, we're very happy that we are issuing visas that are valid for 10 years and encourage Kazakhstanis to visit the United States. But I would also like to see Americans visiting Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan is now allowed for visa-free travel to Kazakhstan for American citizens, and I hope that will show a lot of openness between our countries. But I personally enjoy being open with people and people being open with me. Well, you know, we've had 25 years already of relations, diplomatic relations. In fact, the United States is very proud to have been the first country to recognize Kazakhstan's independence, and actually to be the first country to establish an embassy in Kazakhstan, here in Almaty, now 26 years ago. And in the course of our celebrations, we had a lot of programs, also connected with the event of the Astana Expo of this year. And we had a seminar in which we had 3 former ambassadors to Kazakhstan who participated in it in Astana, you know, at the Presidential Library, in which we discussed the experience over the last 25 years. So we had this kind of formal discussions on that area. We had lots of cultural programming, both in Astana and in Almaty, and then cultural groups that went throughout Kazakhstan, dancers, singers, and that was a way of how we you know, celebrated these 25 years of our relationship together. So it was there were so many events. It's hard for me to remember them all. We have very active missions here in Almaty and in Astana, and I know we had so many visitors came in. We actually had American cowboys who came from Wyoming to play kokpar, and they managed to score a couple of goals. And I know they want to learn the game better, and but they really enjoyed, and that was also part of our 25 years of showing the relationship between our countries and our people. So, you know, we had, of course, the visits of the presidential delegation that came to the Astana Expo. We, of course, had our pavilion at Expo, and we had, as I said, a whole series of events over the last year. And so I think that, you know, that was very, very important in the development of our relations for the next 25 years. Well, you know, historically, you know, this area, you know, Kazakhstan included, you know, has been a part of the Russian world, you know, whether it was the Russian Empire and then, of course, the 70-some years of the Soviet Union. And, of course, Russian as a language and a culture was broadly taught and spoken, as it is to this day in Kazakhstan. And there's a great affinity, I think, of peoples in this area in a friendly way with, of course, with Russia, with its language and with its culture that is beyond just the state of the Russian Federation, but it's, you know, Russia as a language, as a culture, its literature and things, which is universal in many respects too. So it's very understandable that why Russian culture and language is very attractive to people in Kazakhstan. You know, meanwhile, and I think the policy of Kazakhstan is, again, respecting Russian as a language of communication among and across the minorities and the groups who live in Kazakhstan. And so that's perfectly understandable. And, you know, and Kazakhstan itself is developing its own Kazakh language, you know, media, its television, its publications, its own study of the language and things of that nature, so that the population can have a strong affinity for the language of Kazakhstan, as well as you know, its culture and the like too. And as a country that has a population of Russian speakers, Kazakh speakers, ethnic mix and the like too, that's perfectly understandable. Just as we understand there is a strong desire of Kazakhstan to encourage the study of English language. This is because, I mean, English too is a language. It's not, while it's the language that most people associate with the United States and Great Britain, nevertheless, it's a global language that opens a lot of the world of commerce and science and technology in that language. And so the United States, because we are a majority English language country, we're involved in assisting Kazakhstan in its desire to increase the study of the English language, but not at the expense of, certainly, of the Russian language and its rich cultural and historical associations in this region of the world. I think it's good for people to know many languages and to respect them and respect the cultures that they reflect. And I think Kazakhstan has a unique relationship with languages of the peoples that have lived and worked in this country. And so I think that in 25 years you're seeing the development of the multilingualism of Kazakhstan, which is, I think, very natural. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not an expert on languages, and however, as I understand, from the position of the government of Kazakhstan, is that the Latinization of the Kazakh language doesn't stop anyone from studying and speaking in Russian. I mean, they're not Latinizing the alphabet for Russian, and so Russian will still be taught and spoken, in Kyrilliцы as it has been. And as I understand, the idea of having the more Latinized alphabet for Kazakhstan is to enable Kazakhstanis to make it easier for them to study English because of this desire, so that if they have a Latin script that they're going to have to know for English, and as the government would like everyone to be English speakers as well as Russian speakers and Kazakh speakers, that they're already going to have to know the Latin alphabet for English. And I suppose that the argument is that the Kazakh language, which if it's taught in a Latin alphabet, that will make it easier for students to study English. So I really don't think that it threatens the Russian language or the study of it, or divides or should divide people. Well, the United States has long supported the idea of UNESCO, which is supporting and protecting the cultural heritage of the world, of world places. Now, what the United States has long been concerned about, and this is even before the coming into office of President Trump, we have long called for reforms, significant reforms in UNESCO, and how it uses the money, that the significant sums of money that it gets for the development and protection of cultural projects. So the United States has not been pleased by how this organization is reforming itself. And the United States has been concerned about the politicization of some of the decisions that have been made by UNESCO. I mean, cultural heritage sites, should not be politicized, and decisions shouldn't be made, directed at countries. In this case, some of the decisions of UNESCO that have been, in some respects, pointed at Israel have upset and concerned the United States. So the United States administration decided that it would withdraw as a member of UNESCO. However, at the same time, the United States wants to continue working with UNESCO and has asked and is asking the executive committee of UNESCO to allow the United States to be an observer mission to UNESCO. So that means that the United States continues and wants to have a relationship with UNESCO and wants to support UNESCO as it can, as an observer over it. And we will see then how UNESCO develops, if it is less politicized and that its reforms for the use of the funding of it. And the United States has had to pay an awful lot for UNESCO. So, the reasons of withdrawal were financial and reform-related, as well as the politicization. But having said that, the United States values the principles of UNESCO and wants to continue working with it, but right now as a observer mission to UNESCO. Well, like you said, the world is always full of unfortunate disagreements and conflicts and tensions around as a diplomat, my job, moi chleb, as I said, is to try to prevent conflicts, certainly violent conflicts from emerging. How to deal with disagreements and tensions and the like and this is the view of my government and of my president and the like, is to seek diplomatic means and through discussion to resolve tensions and the like. And nobody really wants a military conflict. And I think that countries like the United States and the like would do everything. I would hope that, just the idea of a world war is just, everyone should do everything to try to ensure that would never happen, because it would be catastrophic for everyone. This wouldn't be like the Second World War. So I think that, at the end of the day, that, the countries of the world, certainly the major countries of the world, we work together to try to resolve tensions and conflicts, and in order to prevent anything that might enlarge the sphere of violence and the like too. So it's a mission for all of us, and I know that we are determined to try to ensure. There are many threats emerging from this world, and sometimes the use of force is unavoidable, but I think it's always the responsible use of it, that it does not expand to engulf whole areas and regions. And so the United States spends a lot of time trying to develop those solutions peacefully. Well, we appreciate the role that Kazakhstan has played as being a place, as offering Kazakhstan as a place for peaceful discussions. This has, in fact, a long history in the way. Here in Almaty, Kazakhstan hosted very sensitive discussions among the parties to the Iran nuclear deal here. It came to Almaty, and that was greatly appreciated by all the parties, because it was a place that they could speak and confidentially and deal with many issues. I think that most recently, Astana is the scene where they're hosting discussions to try to bring into an effect a durable ceasefire and an ending of violence in Syria, so that the political discussions to resolve Syria's problem that are located in Geneva can succeed. And so the United States has been invited and has been an observer to these discussions, even though the United States has not been a participant in the negotiations among the parties to this ceasefire. But nevertheless, I think the fact that Kazakhstan has offered its good services as a place for this is appreciated. And I think that's it's good that we see a country like Kazakhstan that has good relationship with all of its neighbors and with, Russia, China, the United States, Europe, and the like, and that they use that as a means to foster dialogue and discussion in a non-confrontational way. Well, the Eurasian Economic Union, is an organization of the countries that are member countries of it, and as an economic organization, they will have to sort out their economic. The United States is not a party to it. The United States looks at these economic organizations that if they can lead to economic prosperity, but if they're, you know, that's fine. I mean, we certainly are desirous of, we're glad that Kazakhstan, for instance, is a member of the WTO, you know, the World Trade Organization, as is Kyrgyzstan and now Tajikistan. But in the Eurasia Economic Union, you know, if it's not direct